Welcome to the Father on Purpose podcast, a show designed to help dads disciple their children. It's for fathers who don't just want to raise children, but lead them in a way that honors Jesus. It's a place where you might discover, for the first time, that you're not a father on accident, which makes you, of course, a father on purpose. To help guide us on that journey are our hosts, Kent Evans and Lawson Brown. Kent's a husband, a dad, an author, and the co-founder of Manhood Journey. Lawson's a husband, a father, a military veteran, and business executive. He believes that if he just keeps trying, one day he'll get Kent to have a coherent train of thought. Good luck with that. As you listen, we hope you'll find biblical ideas, practical tips, and even have some fun along the journey. Every single dad is a disciple maker. The only question? Discipling them. How? To where? Let's discover that together. As we dive in, remember, you are not a father on accident, so go be a father on purpose. Welcome aboard.
Hey Dad, welcome to episode 209, and we're going to talk about looking for the overlooked on today's episode, something that I think is going to be very, very helpful, both to you personally as a dad, but also something you can relay to your children and or catch them doing this and give them a big hearty pat on the back whenever they do this. Before we dive in, let's talk about two very important things. Number one, the fatherhood guard. You may wonder, what in the world is that? That is the team of people that support our ministry every single month. And you may be tempted to push fast forward and skip over the next few seconds, but if you do, here's what that means. You don't understand how podcasts work. And what I mean by that is, this thing does not get put together for free. Lawson's got to eat. I've got to eat. Our producer's got to eat. The interwebs need to be paid for when we edit the show. There are some costs associated with producing the Father on Purpose podcast. We need your help in helping offset those costs every month. And one way you can do that is by diving into the fatherhood guard. Why do we call it that? Because dads are crucial to our churches, our societies, our cities, and we need you to help arm those dads. So it's kind of like you're the guy in the back room helping load up the shields and the spears and the ammo that we're going to then give to dads who are trying to be godly fathers. We need you to become a member of the Fatherhood Guard today. You just go to manhoodjourney.org/guard. manhoodjourney.org/guard. And when you jump in at any monthly level, we send you an amazing hat from the guys at Range Leather. And at some point in this episode, I know we're recording the video, I'll grab one of those hats and show it to you on the video. You get a hat. And yeah, you could jump in for $10 a month and then get your hat and cancel it. But if you do, man, you got deep issues, and this podcast will not solve them. Jump into the Fatherhood Guard today. Support this show that you have come to know and love. And head over to rangeleather.com. rangeleather.com, where you can snag amazing American-made products from Range Leather in Laramie, Wyoming, and get 15% off by using the code MJ15. Use the code MJ15, and from our sponsor, rangeleather.com, go snag something amazing. rangeleather.com, code MJ15. Lawson, get us started on today's episode about looking for the overlooked by talking to me about your family and where some of the idea for this episode came from on your side.
Good job with all that intro, man. That was good. I cannot wait to get my Fatherhood Guard hat. That logo is
We didn't send yours to you already?
Huh?
You don't have yours already?
I don't think so. No.
Man, I am asleep at the hat sending wheel. Okay.
Yeah, good. Get it to me. That logo is good looking, dude. Yeah, so I had a cool thing happen to me on Father's Day. Olivia is a yoga teacher extraordinaire down here where we live, and she's just phenomenal. And I don't do it enough, but I do enjoy going to her classes. It's a great studio. Not only am I obviously a super proud dad watching her do her thing, and she's so good at it. And then, when someone realizes I'm her dad after the class, I get to hear how great Olivia is. And so I just eat that up, of course. But for Father's Day, she made a specific, like, hey, Dad, you and Mom come to my class. And so in her typical fashion, she themes what she says. A lot of times she has a theme to the class. It's like a reminder. You're in there for an hour. It's you're listening and following along. So you just kind of put your mind on autopilot and do what you're told. And an hour later, you've had a great workout, feeling more agile and mobile and all that good stuff. But rather than simply focus on the body alone, I love how Olivia also includes like some mental thoughts, some exercises and introspection sometimes. And so she started the class out and kind of was like, on Father's Day, I can't go into too much detail or I'll start crying. I got the best dad in the world. So, she's just my girl. Both of them are, but Olivia was really special to do that. And she said, for today, I want to talk about something that Dad talked about to us girls when we were young, about looking for the overlooked.
I thought it was going to be max out your 401k. That's interesting. Okay, go ahead.
That too. That's lessons nowadays, right?
There we go.
Yeah. And she talked about when she was a little girl going into middle school and us having, kicked around the idea of, hey, when you go in there, think about keeping an eye out. Like let's look for the overlooked in life. And so, I encourage them to be that person who kind of keeps an eye out, keeps your antenna up, like who's being left out, who feels like they don't belong. There's a difference between, like feeling like you're left out and feeling like you just don't belong. There's a difference there.
Yeah.
Who's walking around and nobody sees them. They are the ones who are overlooked, and put yourself in that frame of mind. That's awful. I mean, that when you truly feel like I'm around people, but nobody cares about me. Nobody is even notices that I'm here, much less includes me. And so she talked about that as I was getting choked up right now. She talked about that, getting ready, kind of getting our mindset ready before the class really got going. And so I was wondering to myself, like, wow, it's stuck in her brain for a long time, 15, 20 years now. And she does do that. I've seen her go out of her way to pull somebody in. It takes a leader, it takes a bit of a leader, but it also just takes a compassionate heart. And many times when we're open, we can get into kind of, how do we teach our kids that? How do we talk about that? Or how do we do that ourselves and model that? But I think it is rooted in having that perspective and remembering how Jesus modeled. It was kind of a big thing to him. It was kind of his thing. that he walked the earth and gravitated to the ones who were left out. And so when we do that, we model it for our kids.
Yeah.
And I think God has built our heart in a special way that he rewards us in those moments. When you do something for someone else, Matthew 25, verses 38 through 40, I think this is a good one to reflect on. It says, when did you see a stranger and invite them in, or someone who needed clothes and they clothed you? When did we see you sick or in prison and go visit you? The king will reply, truly I tell you, whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me.
Yeah.
And that is God in our lives saying, when you do that, you're doing that for me. And I think he rewards us and he cherishes us just like I did when Olivia talked about it this past weekend. And then when I've seen them as kids talking about or getting even to witness They see that little kid over there that is not in the circle, and they go and invite him over. Man, that's a proud dad moment, and that comes naturally for some. It doesn't come naturally for all of us. And so you got to practice that, and you got to model that with our kids, and then they too understand the reward and the honoring of God that comes with it.
And it's so counterintuitive when you think about it from like a human standpoint or a personal standpoint. And when you walk into a room, especially if I'll just play out my own context. If I walk into a room, and I have walked into hundreds or thousands of rooms where there's a hierarchy in the room. There's somebody who's in charge. Maybe it's the boss or the leader of the room. And then there's people who are there to maybe consume or be part of the meeting. And then sometimes there's people there to serve the meeting. Maybe they're serving the food, or, they are somehow getting the room ready or something like that. And you're everything in you wants to put people in like this stack rank kind of order, where there's the important people, and then there's the somewhat important people, the slightly less important people, and then there's the totally unimportant people. And for me, it is not natural for me to do what Jesus did. Right. It's not natural for me to see the overlooked person and immediately gravitate toward them. And I'm having to learn how to do that better and better as I get older. And more of the fruit of the Spirit.
Sometimes, if anything, I do the opposite. I'm like, who do I want to be with? And then I go, I walk right past people who are being overlooked and make sure that I get myself included.
Oh, man. I remember this being something I observed in our pastor who started the church that I attend. His name is Bob Russell. We've actually had him on this podcast before. Bob's now 80 and still a great friend and continues to help me personally, but also just our ministry in general. And Bob, as the church grew, you'd be talking to Bob maybe in the lobby or after church in the sanctuary. And because it was a relatively large church, like when he left it, it was more than 10,000 weekly attendees, maybe 15,000, big church. And there would be dozens, if not hundreds of people walking past the two of you. And they would make some kind of gesture toward Bob. You could see it out of the corner of your eye. They'd be like, wave to him or, hey, Bob, something like that. And Bob was amazing at, he never acknowledged anybody but the person he was talking to in the moment. And I can literally think of other people on that same staff, no offense if you're listening and you think this might be you, who were the opposite. They would stand there and talk to you, and someone would wave, and they'd go, just a second, and put their finger in front of your face and go, hey, Tom, how's it going? And they'd interrupt, and you just think, wow, okay, I guess Tom's more important than me because our conversation just ended. And it was so weird. Bob had this singular focus and this ability to be able to dial in to whoever he's talking to right in the moment. My son Timothy is like this. Not that my other boys ignore people, but Timothy's like this. In fact, I'm thinking of somebody who I don't want to give too many details. It might be a little exposing if I were saying, but I can think of a person in Timothy's life, and this person, about his age, would be generally ignored by everybody around him. Because of some issues related to, just developmental things. But Timothy is almost the exact opposite. We've had this person's mom come to us before and just go, I can't tell you what it means for my son to have Timothy as a friend.
Wow.
Because nobody else really wants to be his friend. Oh, man. And Timothy is like the best at this. He has a soft heart. He's a kind-hearted person kind of from the jump. Like his DNA is kind of kindly wired. Not that I get an excuse because I don't do this as well as Timothy, but man, Timothy's a poster child for this. He's really good at finding the overlooked, finding the marginalized, finding the person who doesn't seem to get as much attention and paying very close attention to that person.
So on that note, back to the story of Father's Day, Olivia, she threw an interesting twist that it sort of blew me away. I did not expect this. And I wonder how you think this applies to godly fatherhood. It's about ourselves as dads. So here's what she did. The theme was look for the overlooked, and then midway through the class, maybe something like that. we've been grounding ourselves. We've been listening to her instruction. She's been weaving in sort of some ways to think about this sort of thing. And then she said, as multifaceted people, there are parts of us that sometimes can get left out, and sometimes parts of ourselves dominate. And I was like, whoa, okay. And she asked, what inside you, what part of yourself are you overlooking?
Interesting.
How can you look for the overlooked inside yourself? And dude, I mean, God spoke to me in that moment. For the rest of the class, I was going along and doing the yoga and sweating my little tail off, but I was really in my head, and I was in prayer and meditating on. That's a great life lesson, because what I felt, I didn't expect to hear her explain it that way, about kind of looking within yourself, and we don't want to take this apart too much or triage it to the degree of overanalyzing, but there are parts of us that I've got my work self. Sometimes we're all, you want to be an authentic person. You want to be who you are with your family, as you are with your coworkers and with customers or whatever. But you turn it up a little bit there, depending on whether you're talking in front of a group, or riding in a car with someone to go make a sales visit, or working on a project that takes, a lot of thought and analytics, and but zooming out a little bit. The part of me who has lately been dominating is this sort of stressed out worker, this work guy.
Right.
And who's been overlooked within myself is the health minded. That's one, but also kind of the quiet, introspective, prayerful listening. I'm talking about listening to God and going to Him in prayer and in my quiet time, because who's been dominating is the loud, working stress guy. That's holding a tight white knuckle grip on everything, because if I don't, what happens at work, and what happens at work is going to affect the rest of the family and our finances and blah, blah, blah. And that guy is just, So during the class, I literally thought this way, and I did this. I asked work guy, I asked him to go take a seat. Like, we're going to ask you, love you, but we've had a little much of you. So why don't you go, and I'm going to invite, I've been overlooking this other part of me, and I'm going to invite the health-minded, mentally, well-being, that's been kind of in the corner, and the part of me who has been maybe hanging around the edges, but not center stage, is the faith guy, is the quiet time. I in that moment, I literally began realizing how much I miss what I've gotten away from, is when that's quiet time. It's trail walks in the woods. It's quiet time in the morning with coffee and a Bible and my journal and writing and praying.
Praying? Do you do some praying?
Doing some praying. And so I invited those two guys to step forward more and not feel overlooked, because without them, my fatherhood is affected, my marriage is affected, my work guy is affected. And so I asked them to come center stage.
I think as we look at it, the thing that I would probably add to the conversation is these aren't separate people, right? Like, so I know it's a helpful mental exercise.
Right.
It's a helpful mental exercise to think about it that way. Biblically speaking, right? We're going to be one person. We are one person. We have skills and gifts and leanings or tendencies that we might overplay, right? So, for example, I know whether a guy listening to this, gets lost in the separate people and metaphor or not, there are times when we take what we're doing at work and we over apply that in our marriage or with our kids, right? So you might be a really good engineer and you're great at dissecting, and planning, and putting things in rows and columns. And then your wife brings you a problem and you just go, "Oh, this is simple. You got a cost and you got a problem and you got a timeline." Right. And she's going, whoa. This is not what I need right now. Like that's not. And so the capacity to have the awareness. April and I were talking the other day about just reading the room, like the ability to read the room and know which spiritual bag you kind of need to reach into, and lean on that in a while. So, for example, I'll use Jesus as my example. Right, he is the ultimate man. Right, he is the ultimate example. I don't want to be more like Lawson or Kent or anybody else. Right. I want to be more like Jesus. And what he had the capacity to do perfectly, that we have the capacity to do, albeit imperfectly, is know what somebody needed in the moment and elevate that part of what he needed to bring to the table. So I'll use Peter as my shining example, right? Within a 1 hour span, if you're looking at like what happened with Peter at one point, is Jesus said to the disciples, "Who do they say I am?" And they all have answers. And Peter said, "You're the Son of God." And Jesus says to Peter, "Hey, only God could have revealed that to you, Simon. Nice job," basically. Like he gives Simon this compliment at being able to hear from God and say out loud what God said to him. So at one moment, Jesus says to Peter, "Way to go, man." So that's the encouraging form of Jesus. That's like Jesus with his encouragement hat on, right? Then not long after that, Jesus says, "I'm going to suffer many things. This is going to end badly. I'll be back, but it's going to be really rough." And then Peter goes, "Well, hey, I'm not going to let you do that. I'm going to stand in the way." And Jesus is like, "Wait a minute. No, I'm supposed to do this. This is my mission." And then he says, "Get behind me, Satan. You are a stumbling block to me." Like he's talking to Peter like that. Not long after he paid Peter this compliment. So what I think's amazing is back to the idea that I think we have capacity inside us, the fruit of the Spirit. It's not called the fruits of the Spirit. It's called the fruit of the Spirit. Love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, gentleness, self-control. Man, how often do I reach in my bag and grab the gentleness club? Right? And that's not a club that pays you in corporate America often, right? You don't go, "You know what? I think we want to do our end of the year review. Lawson, you did okay on the numbers. We appreciate your financial contribution and you held costs down and that's great. And we were thinking about promoting you for those things. However, what we noticed was how gentle you are. And so we'd like to promote you to vice president or CEO. And you know why? It's because of all that gentleness." And you go, "No, no one in the history of corporate America ever got promoted for being gentle." Like I'm overstating the point, but that is not something that you see a lot of in like the environments where we tend to get rewarded. That's not like usually rewarded on the face of it. And then the challenge becomes for us is then we turn on this version of ourselves, to your point, at work. That's a little more crisp, a little more driven, a little more aggressive, or a lot more aggressive, whatever. And then we don't know how to turn it off. Yeah. Like I've worked with a guy, Lawson, who has been told so long, "You're a leader, you're a leader, you're a leader, you're a leader." He doesn't know how not to lead. And so you think, wow, that's really cool. Like type A, driven, conquer, take the hill. If I walk into a surgical suite and I think I'm the leader, the patient is going to die because I'm not an actual doctor, right? So there are people I've worked with in the past where you go, "Hey man," like I was on an airplane Thursday or Sunday coming home from Houston. They don't need me in the cockpit. Like it would be counterproductive to the hundreds of lives on that airplane for me to go walk up into the cockpit and take over because I'm a type A. I'm a leader. No, man. I sit in my seat. We get there safely. I get out of my seat. I create problems. And what's crazy to me is sometimes, going back to the topic of today's show, overlooking looking for the overlooked, I think of something like Philippians 2. Philippians 2. Do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. Rather, in humility, value others above yourselves, not looking to your own interests, but each of you to the interests of others. And I think, man, that's almost like an anti-corporate America statement. Like, I don't mean that negatively. There's a lot of great company cultures where they're like, we love people, we try to help people, I got it. However, at the end of the day, public companies are built to create a profit. We all understand that model. I don't know how many people get rewarded walking into their job saying, you know what I'm after this week? My quarterly KPI is going to be look after the interests of others. And your boss is going to go, that's cute. Let's also be looking after the sales forecast, shall we? Let's do that too. Just because it doesn't always seem to be rewarded yet, it's the kind of things that when you see your daughter, when I see my boys, it's the kind of things that we know has a deeper relational impact and a deeper spiritual impact. And to your point, we've got to make sure that we're modeling this as well as we can. If I'm out, well, my son Timothy and I traveled this weekend. We went on Friday to Houston and on Sunday back from Houston. And all we had were travel problems and delays. Massive travel problems, flights canceled, the whole bit. And if I walk up to the person at the United counter and I tell her what I think of her airline and their lousy app that did not work at all in the moment I really needed it to work, my 13-year-old son is watching me handle that person. And so instead, if I walk up and go, excuse me, I know it's crazy town in here right now and everybody's freaking out, which I did this several times. And I just go, I really need some help. Do you think you can help me? And if I handle her that way, if I handle the worker that way, Timothy, my son, sees something in how I'm doing that.
Right.
And then if I would, by contrast, handle somebody else a different way, he's like, golly, how do I resolve this duplicity in my father? And so for us, to your point, I would love to be the kind of guy who gets accused of looking for the overlooked over and over. I don't know that would be what my kids would say about me. However, I do want to be closer and closer to that Philippians verse where I don't do anything out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. That'd be amazing.
Yeah, you wrap that up very nicely. I think it too. Looking for the overlooked is like we talked about. Sometimes some people it comes supernatural to. Audrey's got a good way about that, but sometimes I'm a little focused, and just buzz right past someone who is overlooked. You got to be mindful of it, but it doesn't have to come from us. God in His Word talks over and over about us overflowing with Him.
Yes.
2 Corinthians 1, 3, and 4.
Yeah.
This morning, literally on my Bible app, popped up as I was writing in our show notes this idea to kick around for look for the overlooked.
I had prayed God to send you a Bible verse while you were doing the show notes.
Well, He listened.
So you're welcome.
Yeah. That was, hey, thanks, Ken. Good job. Good job that you did that.
That's fantastic. Dripping with sarcasm. Well played. Well played.
Yeah. Thank you for controlling the Lord of the universe with your prayer. So 2 Corinthians 1, 3, and 4 talks about, it says, praise be to the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, the Father of compassion and the God of all comfort, who comforts us in all our troubles, so that we can comfort those in any trouble with the comfort we ourselves receive from God.
Yeah.
And so that is looking for the overlooked through His eyes and through His source and His means, because I can only comfort with the love that He gives. It is if the comfort that He gives me overflows, then I'm able to take that to other people. And so it's an assurance to me, and it's a relief to me that it's not up to me, because I'm not equipped. I'm not good at it. I don't do it naturally. I have to work at it. I have to have Him help me do it. And there are times in our lives where someone needs something, not from us, but they need to hear from Him. And God enjoys involving us, and we get to be a recipient of his comfort in order to offer that to someone else. And it's so great when it just hits the spot and you're like, that I had nothing to do with that. Like God put us together, our paths cross. Thankfully I heard him. He gave me something. I offered it to you, and it was exactly what that person needed in that moment. And so looking for the overlooked, I think there's a lesson here for us as dads.
Yes.
That we are watchful and mindful of our own families, within our own families, the dynamics that's happening, the things that our children are going through, that we are then taking that next step to be equipped through our Heavenly Father to help them go out into the world with that mindset, with that perspective, that lens that they're looking through, and they can spot, I picture like infrared radar, and these bodies show up, and that's who God is putting in your life, and like you can see them through his lens clearly.
Yeah.
Versus when we take that lens off, they blend in, like let's not rely on ourselves is what I'm saying.
A couple of weeks ago, we had a guest on the show, Mark Batterson, the author. And one of the things Mark said publicly, and I heard him say this at the event I was at last summer in DC, is he said, every time he gets up to preach, he tries to remind himself. And he says a little sentence in his head, and he says, everyone in the room is wrestling with something I don't understand. And he just reminds himself of that. He just takes like a moment to say that sentence in his own head, and it makes his communication more compassionate and not so caustic or aggressive, right? So like one thing I've always been able to do, I've always been able to communicate what I'm thinking. That's never really been the problem. It's never really been the problem. No one ever said to me, gee, Kent, I wish you'd be more clear. Gee, Kent, I wish you'd tell us what's actually on your mind. No one ever says that. What they say, though, is, man, you don't have to be such a jerk when you share it. You don't have to be so aggressive. You don't have to say it twice. There's those kind of things where I'm like, I just can be like a battering ram, right? I may have a good point, but I just be a battering ram. As opposed to, like a server who holds it up and offers you the hors d'oeuvre, not the guy who shoves it in your mouth. And so I love the way Mark says that, is to remind himself of that. Everybody he's talking to is struggling with something that he doesn't fully understand. And I think the second thing I want to say to dads, as we just kind of think about practical application for today's show, so amazing you got to do that with your daughter, by the way, and I'm grateful that she was able to share something that was that meaningful. That's just such a cool high. It's like one of those moments you put on your fatherhood radar where it's like, that was a good day. We've got to catch our children doing the right things, right? It's so easy to become the dad who just keeps correcting his children. Don't do that. Don't do that. Fix that. Don't do that. And yeah, for sure. You tell your 2-year-old to stay out of the traffic and all that. There's things you've got to do, even for the sake of safety, to help your kids be corrected when they're really young. But as they get a bit older, even at 6 or 8 or 10 years old, if you notice your kid walk into first grade and he or she walks up to, a person who just doesn't have a lot of friends, or sits with the person at lunch, or you hear that story, from a teacher who says, hey, I saw your kid today in 2nd grade. He went and played with, Billy in the corner, and Billy doesn't have a lot of friends. I just wanted to let you know your kid did that. That should be like celebration time, man.
Big time. Yeah.
That's better than your kid acing the ACT. Right. That's better than them getting into Harvard. That's better than
them getting the starting position on the ball team.
And so those kind of things, man, we often reward and notice behavior in our children, and we don't often reward and notice character in our children. And it takes a lot of character to go past all the cool kids,
right,
and sit with the marginalized kid. Or it takes a lot of character to be associated with the marginalized or the difficult person in an environment, or you may be I was playing soccer last year. I shouldn't have been earlier this year. Too old for this. But out of 10 players on the team, maybe 11, I was 10th best, maybe 11th best. Like I literally, partly my age, partly my skill level, but it was clear that I just was not going to be the star goal scoring player on the team. My job then becomes to encourage the other players on the team, right? I may step in occasionally and try to take a few licks and see if I can keep up, but I don't want to dominate the playing time, and I want to encourage other players. And when you see your kid doing that, when you see your daughter, she's 10th on the bench and she does not get in the rotation, but she's the one clapping every time something goes right.
Dude,
get back in there. We've got to notice these things in our children and pour gasoline on that fire. That is good character. That is good character. And we want to reward it. Not just, hey, I'm proud of you and you really did the Evans family proud today. No, that's right. What they did is they did God proud.
Yeah.
They did God proud because of what you said in 2 Corinthians. God gave them some comfort and they extended that comfort. It's not their comfort. It's God's comfort. He gave it to us on loan. This comfort is on loan. We got to steward it. You stewarded God's love today well, my daughter, my son. Let's go catch our kids looking for the overlooked. And let's notice it. Let's point it out. And let's pour gas on that good character fire. Come on back next week. And we can't wait to see you again at the Father on Purpose podcast. Hey, Dad, guess what? Today's episode does not get produced for free. We have some costs around here, and aside from our amazing sponsors, we have a group of people who help share that burden, and they're called the Fatherhood Guard. You can join the Fatherhood Guard and be a monthly supporter of our ministry and this podcast. What do you get for that? Well, first, the joy of supporting a ministry like Manhood Journey. Secondly, you help animate things around here. You get cool merch. You get sneak previews. You're part of the insider club at Manhood Journey when you join the Fatherhood Guard. Would you consider doing that? Head over to manhoodjourney.org and you can join today. Secondly, consider sharing this episode with somebody you know. There's a pretty good chance that someone you trust shared this show with you in the past. Now, there are men around you who trust you. It might be your brother-in-law, your friend, your pastor. You know somebody who would benefit from today's episode, who's a dad that needs to be encouraged. Share this show with them today. And remember, as you go, you are not a father on accident, so go be a father on purpose.